Hello folks, this is Brew. This is what you can call a big deck tag / primer for blue-white flash in standard. I basically took this deck to 3 PPTQs and the 2 last ones with this exact build that I'm gonna go through this time. I ended up in top 4 and then lost in the finals of another PPTQ, but still I think there are some card choices that need to be revised, but most of all I think I just should have played the mirror match more often so that I could have known more nuances about the mirror. I was basically prepared for everything except for mirror, even though at the last PPTQ yesterday I've managed to win a couple of mirror matches, but ultimately lost a mirror match in the finals. This is recorded when day 2 of SCG Knox will open is approaching, and there are a bunch of blue-whites there with few tags that I like, that are not really present here, but I'm gonna mention them so that you get the full picture. First, let's start with the mana base. I'm pretty happy with 25 lands. There was rarely a situation when I was straight up mana screwed. I mean, not enough lands. So 25 is okay, especially considering the smuggler sculptures. Then I think 1 Abbey is correct. You want 1 utility land. And actually in the mirror match, when it's an attrition war, basically having a way to, crew up the copter out of an empty board when you're flooding is actually pretty relevant. And later on it could be a big finisher, but you have to watch out for Stasis Snare, of course. And 6 islands was actually enough to have extra blue cards in the main deck compared to some other builds. So if you actually end up playing 7, thinking that, okay, you have extra counters in the main, you want to be able to reliably cast them and stuff like that, but then you actually increase the chance of having awkward draws, just like what happened to me in the third game in the PPTQ finals yesterday, where I basically had a dual land and then 4 islands out of 6, and lost a lot of tempo in the pretty swinging game, which I could have overcome if I've drawn second white mana one time. Then I would be able to, cast my hands in a much more efficient way and on time, and not when things are starting to kind of clock up and getting messy. Then I'm fine with 3 Avocents actually here, but I could see playing all 4. It's just a personal preference. Then I've cut here, according to some other columnists, I cut a 1 Reflector and Spirit so that I could both play Counterspell's main deck and put in this Talia, Heretic Qatar, which could be a pretty big deal game 1 against Black-Green Delirium. I like it. And it also helps for some sideboard decisions as well. I ended up running a 3rd one in the sideboard, just because I didn't quite like Gisela plus Bruno plan, and I think I'm not the only one. It's still pretty decent in the mirror match, but there's so many ways to get rid of it. The real thing, I guess, why people have Giselle plus Bruno in the sideboard for the mirror mostly, is that if unanswered, then it's a big deal, and life gain is a big deal, and of course the Bruno thing is a big deal. I strongly advise, if you're running for Giselle Bruno package in the sideboard, play also one of Talia's Lancers in the sideboard, and then if you tech in also, let's say, 1 Talia somewhere in 75, you have so many options what to take with the Lancers. And of course Bruno I think gets back. No, it cannot get back Avacyn, or it can. No, it can. And because if you have Avacyn, Lancers is a good deal. But you probably know all that. I'm just reminding you, and also telling this to people who are not super familiar with the deck. Of course, for Copters, then for Gideons is kind of a question mark. So I'm fine with 4 main, but oftentimes you side out 2, and then I think if you actually forecast that there will be a bunch of blue-whites in your metagame at your tournaments or whatever, you might want to actually run a split, meaning that while you still have Giselle's in the sideboard and Gideon's in the main, so you might as well mix it up and play something like 2 Gideons, 2 Giselle's main, and then additional copies of both cards in the sideboard. I think that's much more optimal thing, because apparently setting out some Gideons in the mirror match is actually correct, so this way you're kind of pre-boarded a little bit. Rebuff is an all-star in the mirror against Black-Green Delirium, the 2 major decks. Is not super exciting against vehicles decks, but it's still alright. Well, you can't counter Scrounger Copter with it, but everything else you can. And I think it's much better play between casting a Selfless Spirits or Rebuff on turn 2 against vehicles. This way I think you kind of help yourself to stabilize a bit more. Here you can have variations. You could run 4 snares in 1 declaration main and then 1 extra declaration sideboard, something like that. Because snare actually in the mirror is much more important because of the instant speed for Copter and Flagship, which I'm gonna talk about as a sideboard attack for the mirror and actually also Black-Green. But then it's like 1 extra slot, etc. But having those is important, of course. In the mirror you probably side in at least 1 Fragmentize, etc. And then Declaration gives your opponent a bunch of clues and stuff like that, and it's a sorcery speed. But I think I like at least a 1 in the mirror, simply because it can actually buy you a lot of time and tempo. But I don't think I want both in the mirror, so there you have it, because the games tend to be kinda long sometimes in the mirror. Then as for sideboards, I have Blast Alliance here, just mainly for energy decks and vehicles decks. Some people run Immolating Glare as an extra like removal for the mirror match, and something that still is fine against aggressive decks. But Blast Alliance just does the job better, and you already have enough of tools for the mirror normally. Then I ran for Spell Shrivels because I didn't like Negate or Dismissal. I wanted a counterspell that can counter anything, and a lot of the time you're fine if they kind of control one of your turns, because some against controlish Delirium deck, because sometimes you could have a too overwhelming board position, too much tempo, that if you just counter Emrakul, actually you're still probably gonna win most of the time. And yeah, I didn't like negates. I wanted something that can counter anything. Even though I ended up at PPTQs playing some blue control decks and some emerge decks, but Exile Clause is too huge, I think. Even though Dismissal also exiles, but it's double blue and 4 mana, so it's kinda clunky. And then, while sometimes they can pay extra 4, but it's kinda rare, and if you don't waste it in those later turns. Sometimes if you accumulate more than one in your hand, or something like Spell Queller plus Rival, you could win one big turn where you fight with cards and response, etc. One Fragmentize just because I tagged in one current in field, just as a catch-all. You could run something else in the slot, like a second Fragmentize, for example, and Fragmentize is pretty good in the mirror, I think. Still, moving back at tournaments where you know you're gonna for sure face a lot of black-green and blue-white, well, especially blue-white and vehicles, you should just run 2 Fragmentize. The field was just because at the last 2 PPTQs I played, I wasn't sure what I was going to face, so I thought that there would be some random weird decks, and that's why I checked this in as a catch and all. Actually quite like it against black-green. Of course they have natural state and appetite, but they don't have it. It's a big deal. Getting rid of, let's say, giant threats that get pumped by Hulk, and getting rid of giant Hulk as well is a big deal. Yeah, then they can rag, but they have to draw it immediately, and even then you kind of like put yourself a turn at least to maybe push some damage with flyers. Confiscation Cup was attack for mirror, and I'm not sure if I actually want it moving on. It's good if you know that they're bringing Gisellas in and that stuff, then it's pretty funny. And I think it's okay against black-green, both aggro and mid-range. Probably a bit, probably better against aggro because they have more early stuff to steal, but it's fine versus mid-range as well. But I think it's just fine, so it's not spectacular. So this card has been kind of underperforming, but it's something that can catch somebody off guard, and something that they might not be planning for. Notice here that this is, you know, sorcery. That's first, so you can instant speed that. But the good part of that is not an enchantment or something, so it's just a sorcery, so they can't like break it and get the creature back. Now it's yours. Fumigate was here just because I really like it against random decks, against vehicles, against energy decks. I think it's fine to sometimes side in one, for example, against black-green and in the mirror, especially if they have Gisela, I think. But it depends. It depends on the play, on the draw, and stuff like that. And then I probably don't bring this in against mid-range black-green, but I definitely do bring, I think, both against black-green aggro, even though they have copters and scroungers. But I think it's important to have this because of how much early game they have. Linval is just a good all-around card for mirror, for aggro, for black-green, like whatever. You might want to have a second one if you think you want to improve some aggro matchups. Because this card is actually fine in so many different matchups, and it allows you to actually get back into the game. Yeah, I think playing 2 is reasonable. And then a couple of spicy cards. Well, Jace is no surprise to most of you in this deck. The only note that I can make here is that 1 copy is apparently enough, and you don't really need the second one. It's going to be clunky. Plus, it was originally to beat Jeskai control and Grixis control and stuff like that. And those decks have been underperforming recently. And actually, with the right build, you're happy to play against blue control decks, whatever configuration that is. And the blue-red emerge is not really a control deck, and that matchup could be swingy, but still beatable with right sideboarding and stuff. Because some of their nut draws are pretty hard to deal with. You just need to make sure that you draw or keep in your starting hand some declarations and stasis snares and some counters. Well, you don't really need counters, but you need to counter when they hard cast stuff or when they cast Deep Fiend, because it's a big body. Because Dismissal in that matchup is pretty good, but blue-red emerge is not really that common. Flagship is crazy in the mirror and black-green. Maybe not really that absurd against mid-range black-green, but still good enough, I think. And big point to notice here is that you don't want to run this card in your sideboard or in main even, but probably just in the sideboard, if you don't play either Talias or Gisellas, because then it becomes slightly hard to crew this up, but then it simply destroys the mirror quite often if they don't have the stasis snare. If you have answer for it, they can't fragmentize it. It pretty much trumps everything unless there is a Gideon emblem or something like that, and you get value just right off the bat after casting it. And if you get to attack with it at least once, it's so much advantage, and you get ahead so crazily. Bear in mind that you can also, have just a single Thraben Inspector in play, and then a Copter, crew the Copter, and with the Copter crew the Sky Sovereign. So it's not as hard as it seems, but I think running Talis or Gisellas helps to, make sure that you're not gonna have awkward situations with the flagship. I think that pretty much rounds it up. If I would have some additional thoughts, I think I will add them in some other video. Just before wrapping up, few notes about what I would have changed and what I probably should have played in the last 2 PPTQs I played. I think probably Confiscation Coup is just not worth it. It's kinda clunky, but sometimes real sweet. Probably should have just played 2 Fragmentized instead of the current infield. Don't think I want the third Talia. 2 was basically enough. I often kind of wanted to bring in an extra one, but I didn't have enough space. I mean, cards to actually set out. Flagship is great. Maybe want the second one. Maybe want the second Lingvala, so those are the options for those slots. Yeah, probably should be to fragmentize. Maybe 3 Shrivels would be enough, and then do something in that slot. Even though you want a bunch of counters and control matchups, and it's good to have those against black-green, but it's kind of bad matchup, so I don't know if an extra Shrivel could save it. Well, could, technically, but it's strange. I suppose just for the sake of the mirrors, maybe it's best to use that extra slot by just, playing 4 Stasis Snares main, and then move 1 declaration into the sideboard, something like that, in the slot of like 4th Spell Shrivel or something. Still, in the black-green matchup, a lot has to go your way to win it, but it's definitely winnable. It's just that when they have a decent hand and they're not just dirtling around the first few turns and actually you know, have some permanence in play, not just Vassal, then it's kind of hard to win. Okay. So a few tips in terms of sideboarding. Things drastically change on the play and on the draw in the mirror match, for example. So I'm just gonna touch black green and the mirror because those are two main ones right now. I think on the play it's correct to keep spirits and selfless and reflectors, and you probably take him out, I think, on the draw, because then you're not gonna be fast enough. You might want to take out rebuffs on the draw. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong. It could be other way around, but I think on the play they're just much better, just for tempo, for pushing the tempo. So yeah, you take out a couple of Gideons, and most likely then you bring either Gisellas or, I don't know, packs of flagships and Linvalas, for example, frags. Actually, Jason Amir, it is risky. I was always scared to actually set it in, but I always wanted to, and I think I should have. So there is that. Jason is also okay against mid-range Delirium. I'm not sure if I want it against the aggro version. Probably not. But against aggro I have some other cards to bring in. Like Fumigate I think is okay against black green aggro. Third Tally is okay against that deck, as well as, you know, like second Linvala or something like that. But yeah, there is a chance that you actually want 4 snares and one deck, and then move that deck into the sideboard. And then I was super impressed on camera with the always watching. I mean, when I was watching the streams from the Knoxville Open, how much work Always Watching is actually doing in the mirror. But I don't want more than one. I think you just run one, and maybe one in the sideboards, that's it. So that's a card that's pretty sick in the mirror, and probably pretty sad against black-green. It could get you like extra tempo and then make your Selfless Spirit into something that is actually threatening, etc. Yeah. Apart from what I know at this far, this is it. Thank you guys for watching. This is an interesting deck, and it is successful and competitive, and you probably noticed that by now. And there are many things you can approach this deck. I hope this was helpful. Until the next sale, goodbye folks.